can I get married online and then file for a spouse visa that way? A lot of people are asking this because the fiance visas require you to have met in person before, within the 2 years before you file for your fiance visa. So some people have not been able to meet in person, unfortunately, because of the pandemic and travel bans and just kind of the world being on fire this year. And it's really put a lot of people's relationship plans on hold. So some people are wondering, can we just marry at a distance and then, go ahead and just start our visa process? And that's, it's definitely a reasonable question to ask. Unfortunately, there are, and supposedly there are some people online who say that they've done this. I don't know if that's really true because I've never seen one in person. What I do want to talk about is the actual law, which is what we always come back to as lawyers, not what someone on the internet said that they did successfully. The government does sometimes make errors. Sometimes people hide things on their cases and the government didn't know the whole story and it did get approved, but it shouldn't have been. So I would say take those purported stories with a grain of salt, because what I do know is what the law says. So there's a law called the Immigration and Nationality Act. It's part of the US federal law, and it is the main source of law that we use when we're talking about, visa regulations and things like that. The law just provides a really general overview, and from there, different cases and forms that the government creates and regulations kind of interpret what the law means. But at a very high level, there is actually a rule about proxy marriages or distance marriages. And so this is what it says. So you can look it up. That we're in a time of what's true, what are real facts, who can you trust? You can Google the Immigration and Nationality Act, and you will find that what it says in INA 101 A35, which is the definition section, the term spouse doesn't include a spouse by reason of any marriage ceremony where the contracting parties thereto are not physically present in the presence of each other. And there's a small piece I couldn't fit on the screen here. Unless the marriage shall have been consummated. So let's go through that legalese quickly. I had to cut it down a little bit, and it just kind of said spouse or husband or wife and like some other things like that. So this is the most important section of it. You can see the actual content, by looking it up online. But basically, in general, they don't consider you to be married if you weren't married physically in the presence of each other under the laws. And there are, of course, a lot of other laws that have to do with what makes a marriage legally binding. So there might be, there are only a few states in the United States, as far as I'm aware, that actually allow proxy or distance marriages. And a lot of them don't allow that. Some foreign countries may allow that. The reason I think that the US does not want to encourage that in the immigration laws is because there are a lot of concerns with human trafficking, people being married against their will and then sent to the United States. There are concerns with fraud, just people marrying people they don't know, or just not even, I don't know, it just seems like a pretty loose standard. Obviously, we're in a really weird time right now. So a lot of people who legitimately, would love to be physically present for their wedding just can't. And so they're asking these questions. But so as an immigration lawyer, I'm always looking at, is there a way to work around this? And is it ultimately in the best interest of my client to try to lawyer this up and make it work? So obviously in this case, we've got this first part of it here. You have to be physically present with each other. So if you're in a situation where you've never met and you can't get the K1 because you haven't met in person, marrying over Skype or through one of these webcam places is not going to fix the situation, because you definitely are not in each other's presence and you've never been together, so you can't have consummated the marriage. For those of you who aren't aware of what, I've got non-native English speakers watching this, consummation of the marriage means, have you had sexual relations with your partner before? So let's say you're in a situation, I'm not saying there's no situation in which they weren't physically present at the wedding, but they've been present before and they have allegedly consummated their marriage. First of all, as a lawyer, I kind of don't know how I would prove that to the government other than showing that you had been physically in the same location previously. So maybe there's some wiggle room there if you could find a legally binding online marriage in a state that allowed it or in a country that allowed it. So say the country of your foreign fiance allows online marriages, potentially you could you know do it and say our marriage was over there. My main concern would be that the immigration process takes so long that, let's say, okay, you say we've consummated our relationship. Obviously, we don't have evidence of that because that would be weird, or we're not going to show it to the government if we do have evidence of that because seriously, right? But we're going to just argue that we've been together and the relationship has been consummated and that this is an online legally binding wedding. Okay, I could see a potential there, right, to get through, although I've never personally seen a case where that was done in my entire career or heard of another attorney doing that, although now I'm curious and I'm going to ask around if anyone's ever tried that. But my concern would be you don't know what the government's ultimately going to say about that for like another 2 years, potentially, year and a half, 2 years in some countries where the wait time for an interview is really long. I mean, 2.5 years. So say you decide we're going to have this online marriage. We think, we've consummated our relationship. We think it's going to work. And then you go through that whole process. They might deny it at the petition stage, but if you get through the petition, it doesn't mean you're okay. They might deny it at the National Visa Center stage, but it doesn't mean you're okay if you get through National Visa Center. They could still deny you at the very end at your interview at the US Embassy. They could say, yeah, no, this totally doesn't qualify. How are you actually going to prove you consummated this? We don't think this qualifies under the law. At which point your only option would be to go meet in person, marry again, and start all over from the very beginning. There's no way you can't at the very end say, okay, well, we're going to remarry right now and we're still going to keep our slot here at the end of the interview. So I just think it's super important that people understand what you would be risking if you were going to try sort of a novel approach to it, where I think for the vast majority of people, waiting a few more months to make sure that they're on very solid legal ground with their immigration case and they don't have that hanging over their head is probably going to be preferable. But there might be some people out there that in their very specific situation, that would be the way to approach it. And I would suggest that you get legal help from an attorney who does that specifically, us or another firm that's reputable, because that is definitely outside of the immigration box. You definitely would not want to hide this fact from immigration, because I think that they would be very suspicious of you if you sort of had a proxy distance relationship and it was like casually came out at the interview. They would be like, these people are suspicious. So you don't want that. You don't want that.